Software for India, South Asia. And on behalf of IBM, it's my pleasure to welcome you all. And it also fills me with pride to see the entire room full, a good 10 minutes before we even started. So that clearly shows that there is interest in this topic. And we promise you, over the course of next 90 minutes, our experts, Tushar and Vijay, will make sure that, it's a meaningful investment of your time, a Tuesday afternoon well spent. Just to give a quick context and maybe get a sense of the relevance of the topic in your day-to-day business. So DPDP, we at IBM believe DPDP Act marks the dawn of a new era, an era where there is increased focus on privacy, more than it ever was before. And it requires organizations to make certain changes to how they operate. Most importantly, it requires organizations to have a robust data security program. So, it's a journey, right? How you go about building one, it's a journey. So, to talk more about how you undergo that journey, what are some of the gaps in that journey that you need to fulfill, and how we are working with organizations across the country, is what we'll have two of our champions, two of our technical experts, Tushar Haralkar, who is the principal technical sales leader for IBM India security software business. He comes with over 20 years of experience and has been with IBM for a good 6 years now. He'll talk more about some of the aspects, the entire life cycle approach to DPDP. And then he'll be joined by his colleague, Vijay Lele, who also comes, I think, with over 15 years of experience. I can see both of them standing here. And he will be giving some live demonstrations. So we have divided this into 3 meaningful segments. The first segment where we do some context setting. Second segment where we have a quick 20-25 minute activity with all of you involved. And the third segment where we get into the solution part and then a couple of live demonstrations. So without any delays, I'd like to welcome Tushar to set the course and take this forward. May I request a round of applause, please?
Thanks, Kapil. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure you would be having a lot of interesting sessions overall, and everybody is talking about data, right? Data is the lifeblood for every organization. Now, I promise you that from IBM side, you will have key takeaways that you can take back, and the value that IBM brings to the table from a data security, privacy, and governance standpoint. So in today's session, okay, all right. So in today's session, I will share how IBM is helping enterprises to simplify the overall data privacy, security, and governance across hybrid multi-cloud. Okay. Now, before I do that, let me share with you a few scary numbers. This is part of the recent survey that happened, and IBM has published this report as part of the cost of a data breach 2023. So few of the highlights are, it takes around 300 days to identify and contain a breach. What does that mean? It means that the attacker is already inside the network and the person goes unnoticed, right? That's the biggest worry today, right? The second is, you all know how much time it takes to deploy an endpoint security solution like EDR, right, or antivirus. It takes several months, but for an attacker, it just takes 4 days to deploy a ransomware. We all know how ransomware is really impacting the business big time. So really, it's a bigger impact. Especially, why 4 days? Because they have also started using automation and AI, right? And And as we are moving towards a digital transformation initiative, where we are not only restricted to on-premise, we are moving to cloud and multi-cloud, the attack surface has also increased. So 2 out of 3 organizations, we are seeing that the attack surface has increased a lot, right? Now, the 2 hottest trends that we see today is, AI automation and cybersecurity, right? We all would love to be part of these 2 hot trends that are currently going on. Now, while the report says that 80% of the organizations still have limited or no use of AI and automation, but what we have also seen is the organizations who have adopted automation and AI in cybersecurity have seen a lesser data breach life cycle, which is around 153 days, right? So the idea is how we can shorten the data breach, right? And the cost, right? Is what the idea is. So this report gives you a good idea of before and after, right? And then what we have also seen is there is 28% increase in the cost of a data breach in India since 2020. Now, as I mentioned, digital transformation is the key initiative that we see today, and business priorities are changing as per that. Now, what that means is the different kind of users that you have, like your employees, contractors, your consumers, partners, are demanding access from anytime, anywhere, any device, right? There is no perimeter now. We are living in a perimeter-less world, right? Our data, applications, infrastructure is spread across hybrid multi-cloud. Now, what does that really mean? That means that data is the byproduct of the digital transformation, right? As I said, data is the lifeblood of every organization. But the challenge is that it is growing exponentially. And because it is growing exponentially, there is lack of visibility. Because there is lack of visibility, we are seeing increasing amount of data breaches. We keep on hearing data breaches almost daily, right? This organization got breached, that organization got breached. Almost every day we keep on hearing this. And one of the main reasons is the data is just exploding. The reality is that data is everywhere, but security is not, right? And as a result of that, we see that the number of days it takes to identify and contain a breach, which is around 300 days. Now, what that summarizes us is that data breach is inevitable, okay? So the question is, it's really not a matter of if you will be breached. The question is when you will be breached. And whenever the breach happens, are you ready for it? That's the biggest question, right? Now, while we are struggling with the different data breaches, we also have to comply to the different regulations based on the industries. Like in banking, you have to comply to the PCI, SOX. In health industry, you have to comply to HIPAA, GDPR, right? Now, there are fines associated with each of those regulations. While compliance is becoming more stringent, what has been introduced now recently is the DPDP Act, which is the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. The goodness is that this act will be applied to the data, the personal data, any form of personal data, which is in the digital form, okay? But it also applies to the data where you have taken a copy of it. Let's say I have taken a digital copy of the Aadhaar card. I have taken a copy of it and then I digitalize it, right? So it applies to those kind of data as well. So anything and everything which is around digital, it will be applied. And as we all know, there are huge penalties associated with that, which is around 250 crores, right? Which is a huge penalty. Now when we look at the data journey, right? We all know what is the first step, right? The first step is to collect the data, right? The first step is to collect the data. And who does this collection? Data fiduciary. Like in the parlance of DPDP, they name it as data fiduciary. while earlier, like in GDPR, we called it as the data controller, right? The data controller. And the data principal is what we say, like you and me, the data principal, we used to call it data subject, right? So typically we are using this make in India terminologies now. So we are getting used to those make in India terminologies. And of course, data processing, right? Now, data processing is also very critical because the organization who is collecting the data may need not be the organization who is processing the data, because a lot of times we see that when you collect the data like the KYC, you are giving it to some third party to process that data. Now, if that third party is compromised, then the ownership still lies with the data fiduciary, right? So data processing becomes really very important. And then finally, how you're storing that data becomes very important, and then finally compliance. Now, when you look at each of these stages, data collection, as part of the compliance, you have to collect minimal data, okay? You need to have a clear notice in terms of why you're collecting the data, for what purpose you're collecting the data, and you need to have consent around it, right? Especially for the guardian, there is also a provision to manage those, right, as per the DPDP Act. And then comes the processing part of it, where you need to make sure that the processor, the data processor, also has the necessary security controls in place. It's not only the data fiduciary, but also the data processor also has to have the necessary controls in place to secure the PII data. And then finally, the data storage, right? When I say data storage, the data at rest and the data in motion also has to be secured. And last but not the least, the compliance. Now, what we have seen in the DPDP Act from a regulation perspective is that while they have clearly laid down, but there are few areas where there is still some bit of ambiguity. Like in GDPR, it says that if there is a data breach, you have to report within 72 hours, right? But I really didn't see anything on that front, that if there is a data breach, in what duration you have to report that, right? So there are few areas where there are ambiguity, but as we progress, I think there will be maturity around this as well. Okay. Now, when we look at this overall journey that we just saw, what you see beneath is basically a mapping of the different breaches, right? If I, as a data principal, irresponsibly gives away the data, then I am also, a victim. I am also, supposed to, pay fines, right? Similarly, the organization as well, right? In case of data breaches. Now, with this context, I wanted to keep this short, and especially as Kapil mentioned, the sessions after lunch are not that easy. We wanted to have this a very interactive session and not bore you with lot of presentation slides. So what we thought, we'll make this very interactive. We will basically have around 8 tables, right? We'll have 8 tables, and what we are going to do is that. You all are security practitioners, so not only we will share the information, but we also wanted to hear your point of view on the challenges that we see today, right? What is your point of view? And then what we will do is, we will take your point of view and translate that into a solution that we can demonstrate to you live for each of these phases, right? We will demonstrate to you live each of these phases and make it very interactive, right? So we'll get into the solution part. We spoke a lot about the problem statement. Now we'll get into the real solution. But before that, we wanted to hear your perspective. So the first challenge that we see today, the biggest challenge that we see today, is the lack of visibility, right? The lack of visibility to where your sensitive data is lying, right? That is the biggest challenge today. The second challenge that we see is the attacks that are happening, like ransomware attacks, privilege escalation attacks. There are different kind of attacks that we are seeing. So from your point of view, what are the different kind of attacks that you're seeing? We would really like to understand. And the third is, as we all know, security, unfortunately, has always been reactive, right? There is some breach which happens, and then we actually have some control around it, right? So it's always been reactive. So that's one challenge that we always see. So what can be done about it is what we will see in the upcoming next session. And then finally, whenever there is a breach, how do we respond to that breach? Typically it is manual, while there are tools, but we have seen the biggest challenges, there are still some manual process around it. And the fourth is obviously one of the key reasons why organizations adopt security is the compliance part of it, right? But the goodness, what I see today when I talk to a lot of C-level executives is they are not looking at security only from a compliance standpoint, but it has transformed to more of proactive risk management as well. So I think those are the paradigm shift that I'm seeing. But I think these are the 5 broad categories that we believe are the challenges. And what we wanted is, these 8 tables, where 2 tables can talk about what is that visibility challenge that you feel, right? Similarly, the rest of the tables can take attack, and the rest of the tables so on and so forth. And what we will do is then we will, one person from each table can come and just summarize, and Vijay will note down the key points, the key point of view that we get from you. And as I said, we will translate that into a solution for you by showing a live demo. We do not want to just show slides to you. We want to really show something live which really works, right? So that's the whole idea. And I think we are good, right? So, yeah.
So for the next 10 odd minutes, what we'll request is if you could discuss within your table, for example, table 1, you can talk about the key challenges you're facing from a visibility perspective, and then, likewise, table 2 is the same. Table 3 and 4 can talk about growing number of attacks, and then what we'll do is, after about 10 minutes, you can stand up on the table and in about a minute, tell the key challenge one key challenge that you're facing in that particular phase, and that's about it. Your time starts now. You'll come back in about 10 minutes. Each table will have about a minute, and to summarize the key points, 1 or 2 key points which were discussed as part of the topic, which was mapped to your table. So maybe I can start with table 1. You can either go there or you can. You have a mic on the table. So maybe we can just stop the discussions and give attention to our Yeah. So you have about a minute, ma'am, just to summarize.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Charu Sachadeva from Tata Consultancies. So the challenge given to us is visibility. From the visibility point of view, the challenge starts from the point of collection. In a whole data life cycle, from the point of data collection to the data destruction, we have the challenge of visibility. So once we have the data, by the collection point, if we have the data visibility very clear, the purpose of collecting that data. So during the life cycle, we can manage it well. So because if I know this is the purpose for which data is getting collected, I would be able to classify it better and then put proper controls there, better controls. And maybe at the time of storage also, I would be able to define the retention period for the data that we have collected. So data collection, data classification are the initial points which I would say as a challenge, that when we collect data, we do not mention the purpose for which we are collecting. At times we just collect it even if it is not required, so we have excess of data collection. And other is, even when we have data collected, we don't classify it, the purpose, I mean, whether it's a confidential data or it's a private, personal. So that classification also comes into picture for that.
Sure.
So my team, if you want to add.
This is Mohit from Tata Consultancy. Just one point I wanted to add, and I think Charu has already covered it. One key component that we need to understand from data visibility is the nature of the data, whether it's structured or unstructured. I think that consequence to further steps in terms of how we will classify that particular set of data. And that is where the challenge lies today, especially with DPDP coming into work.
Perfect. Yeah, makes sense. So thank you so much, ma'am, sir. Just two small things. When somebody is presenting, I'll request everyone to pay attention, not to discuss amongst yourself, and also try and hold the mic closer to your mouth. Okay. So thank you, table one. I think great points. Hopefully, Vijay, you have been able to capture the key essence of them. So I'll request table two, sir, if you want to summarize.
Hello. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tarun. I'm from I4C. Okay, I'll just list out the points we have gathered on this table number 2. One is the multi-platform, the integration issues. The data is being collected on multiple platforms. I'll take example of healthcare or say banking industry. There are so many types of applications or different platforms where data is getting collected. So when you want to collate that data for identification of critical data, the integration itself becomes a problem, right? Second is multi-format. I think this point has been already covered. Oracle, SQL, there are so many different formats on which databases are being created. Again, the collation and integration part becomes a problem. Third is data sources. It is number of clients, huge. It's been already talked about. And secondly, multiple point of collection. All right. Fourth is inventory management of the IT assets being used in data collection and processing. Most of the agencies and organizations we talk to, we realize that they don't have any idea or any central inventory record for the IT assets they are maintaining. Next point is data redundancy and minimization. Minimization becomes a problem because since data is being collected at multiple places, the same client may be giving his data to so many places. So there's a data redundancy. Even if you are able to secure at, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places, he's already given to 6 more places. Next point is collection by third parties, which has been already covered, but it's a relevant point because third parties, many of the organizations and companies are utilizing third party services for collection of data, and how secure those third parties are when they are collecting the data. Similar example happened with the Aadhaar data when it was being collected by some of the third parties, and there was a issue of data leak.
And just from a compliance standpoint, what is your point of view on DPDP Act?
Okay. Yeah.
There is no authorization who all are authorized to collect the data as of now. Any Tom and Harry can collect the data and can misuse it. There is no regulation which deters a collector, if he has misused your data, will be punished. So right now it is a windfall. Anybody can collect any data, can misuse it the way. So till the time regulation comes, yes, if a data has been collected for a certain purpose, if it is misused, this is the penalty. And first of all, there should be some consent from the user when you collect the data. For
Correct.
what purpose are you collecting the data?
Correct.
I think these things, if they are put in place,
Sure.
regulations will come.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, table 2. We'll shift to table 3, and you had a topic on attacks, as Tushar explained.
So basically what we discussed, what was on the increased attack surface and which has led to difficult to defend. And then second is delay in detection of attacks. So the number of attacks have increased due to our attack surface, but at the same time, the delay is still there. It takes a lot of time to detect those attacks.
Amount of time it takes.
Yeah. And in terms of challenge, one is reliance on our cloud and third parties. Now whether we can say it blind attack, I don't know, but like Microsoft Office and all, we are putting everything there. Our data is there. It is being accessed multiple places from anywhere, from our staff and all. So we are relying. If there is an attack on that side, zero-day vulnerabilities, if it is being attacked over there, we don't know. So there is a lot of reliance we have to do, which could be counterproductive. I don't know at any point in time. Then internal attacks also is a challenge in a way. There is still a lack of awareness within the staff. Then with the, one last point is with the increased use of AI ML, basically the social engineering attacks are getting personalized. Now it's not like random, they are getting very sophisticated in terms of smearing attacks and all they are coming on. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you,
Thank
table
you.
3. What I'll request the subsequent tables is also to keep in mind the last, column. I think this side could not even see last column, so that's on regulatory obligations. You covered some of it, so please feel free to add, what you're seeing from a regulatory
The
obligation.
regulatory with regard to DPDP, of course, it's like the data discovery and that journey that we have to start with. It's a difficult task, to start
Correct.
with.
Sure. Thank you, table 3. In the interest of time, we'll quickly move to table 4 now. Somebody wants to just summarize in about a minute.
So good afternoon, everyone. This is Christy here. So most of the points we listed is already discussed by table 3. So what I would like to highlight is a ransomware attack wherein we have a lot of data lying in our desktops, laptops, and ransomware is one of the biggest attack that all organization faces. And then I'll club all the social engineering attacks like phishing, wishing, spoofing, and even AI related attacks like deepfakes and everything. So, it's already covered by table 3.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you, table 4. Table 5.
I think you want to say something?
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I think one point that needs to be covered. I'm Cedric from HDFC Bank. So lack of awareness is one key area that.
Good point. Yeah.
And secondly, when you talk about the compliance to the regulation, the time that is going to be taken to get compliant is going to be a major task at hand for all, at least for a bank of our size. When you talk about HDFC Bank or any other organization which is that huge in the country, the time to comply is going to be huge because the amount of footprints that we have in the market, it's going to be a very difficult
Humongous task. Yeah. Great point. Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Table 5. You don't have the points, or you're not sure who will present?
Yeah, so I think our table was in round robin mode. And also Ashish from Dasera Software India. So obviously one of the reactive postures that we discussed is obviously we need to isolate the impacted asset, whether it's a hardware application or from the network it is no more impacting any other nodes. Then we also have to have a compliance requirement to report it to the cert in, obviously because there are strict guidelines around that. We also need to understand what kind of impact it is going to have for the organization financially and loss of revenue and reputation in the market. So based on the asset classification or category of asset impacted, we will need to understand the impact to the organization and maybe, if required, also required to go public or inform our stakeholders if something is going to impact them as well. And then we also have to take understanding of the insurance cover if we have any, so that we can protect and get some cost recovered based on the cyber insurance that we have on that asset, which is very important nowadays because of the very big scale of attacks that we are seeing on the ransomware. I think more or less these are the things. Anyone want to add any further?
Thank you. Thank you, table 5.
Thank you.
So table 6, you had a lot of
Hi.
notes I saw. So
Yeah. Hi, my name is Rosa. I'm from Providence Healthcare. So what we've tried to do is we've classified it into 4 broad categories. One is the threat landscape, which is ever evolving because of a lot of fake websites, impersonation, AI chatbots also coming in, adding up to the complexity. I think the major one which we wanted to call out was the user awareness how much ever user awareness we create, it is still less. Also, another thing which is prevalent is whenever these incidents happen, we don't have the users coming in and reporting at a proactive level. Somewhere there's that, fear that something has gone wrong. How do we report it?
Yeah.
Another point is the ownership, that it's not clear, it's not clearly defined. And the fourth point was the data breach protocols and procedures not being clearly defined. So how we can improve on that. And a couple of points on the regulatory obligation. We know this, we have the DPDP Act, but we are not sure if we fall into the ambit. If we fall in also, how do we comply?
Yeah.
Also, another point is that how we can implement strong ITDR procedures or BCP procedures, which will ensure that, we are covered.
Great points and beautifully summarized. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
We'll move to table 7. I can't see where they are. Oh, there they are. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gaurav from Avasant. So over here, we have representation from highly regulated industries, healthcare and banking and financial services. So no wonder our focus is primarily on regulatory obligations.
Great.
So very realistic challenges that the team is seeing over here is like, RBI guidelines suggest that, one has to report data breach within the 6 hours of time frame. So that's comes out to be pretty challenging in today's time because one has to connect internally, take necessary approvals. So it's, close to impossible to deliver in that time frame.
Correct.
And number two, again, from the Indian market landscape, I'm sure it's prevalent in other countries as well. A lot of data, patient data is getting shared over WhatsApp and other social media tools, right? So that's the another concern, right? And thirdly, again, we always talk about prioritizing PII data, right? So now almost all data falls under that category. So how to go about managing such volumes of data?
Sure.
Anything else, team wants to add? Yeah.
The cost of compliance.
Yeah.
As per the regulatory part, the cost of compliance for DPDP for a small organization, for that matter, the startups, who is paying for that? The AIML is going to cost a lot. So who is going to fund? Is there any way the government is going to source that?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm sure that's something we probably won't cover in the session today.
Just a comment on that.
But fair point. Yeah.
DPDP Act, if you've read it, there is a waiver for SMEs and startups, and their startup definition is just less than 100 crore revenue and less than 5 years, 10 years tenure formation. So there is some levy given. They will not be tagged as significant data fiduciary, but the rules will come.
Thanks, Prasad, for adding that flavor. Thank you. And thank you, table 7. Good points. I think last table.
Good afternoon, everyone. Regarding the manual response part, okay, since it is manual, so the first and foremost challenge is the time it is going to take. If you are not going to use the proper tools, it will take a lot of time, be it in investigation, be it in investigation, or be it in anything. There is also a challenge of unskilled manpower. So the skill it is very scarce. So while investigating or doing anything, okay, that becomes a challenge. You will have to hire some other companies. And there are SOPs and policies which are not in proper place. So that is also one challenge. Apart from this, regarding the compliance, certain has clear guidelines that you have to report any incident or data breach that has been detected within 6 hours. So that is there. So that's from
Great. So thank you, everybody. I know it was impromptu, like table 1 said, but hopefully,
So there is one point is still, I think, missing in all table. Defining of KPI for information and cybersecurity, IT compliance, and measurement, and then reporting of that KPI to the regulator.
The regulator. Great point. I think it's a good way to end this phase of the session. Great point. Thank you. Tushar, I hope this gives you enough patterns, enough common trends which you can use to structure the rest of your discussion, presentation and demos.
Correct, because we want to relate the solution to your problem statement and not make it very generic, right? So while while we can summarize all of this, and Vijay has noted down some of the key points, what I primarily see is, from a first step of protection is that what you cannot see, you cannot protect, right? It is as simple as that, right? Which brings to your point of, discovery, right? Discovering not only the structured data, but also the unstructured data, because we most of the time protect the structured data which is lying in the RDBMS. The unstructured data is generally avoided or not really protected, right? So, and especially what we are seeing, organizations now not limiting themselves to RDBMS, they are moving to big data, data warehouse, platform as a service, and all of that, right? And the data is just lying everywhere, right? So I think discovery becomes really the first step, right? And we'll get into those very soon in terms of what is the approach that you need to take, irrespective of the tool, because we believe that one single tool cannot solve all of these challenges, right? We do not claim that, and we will not claim that IBM will solve all of these challenges. You definitely need best of the breed technologies to take care of all of these challenges. So what we have done is, we have come up with an approach, okay, which you could refer to as a baseline framework, right? And use it in your organization, okay? And what we will basically give you is one of the solutions that IBM has to offer in that overall framework, right? So we'll fit into those things. Now, what is that framework? So the framework is of 5 key pillars. One is discovery and classification. So I just spoke about it, right? How important it is. Now, before even you do a discovery, can anybody tell what is important? Even before you discover, what is important? Correct. What that relates to is data governance, right? So you need to have a data governance in place, which means you need to have a policy in place in terms of what I need to protect. I need to know that I need to protect, let's say, credit card information, or what is PII to me. I need to know that. I need to have a policy for that, right? And then I can go and discover. If I don't know what my assets are, what I'm going to protect, what I'm going to discover, right? So data governance really becomes very, very important step even before you do discovery of any PII data, right? Now, once you discover where your sensitive data is lying, be it structured or unstructured, the next step obviously is to have visibility. And we discussed that how do you get visibility? You can only get visibility when you know where your sensitive data is lying. So once you have that visibility, you start protecting that data. How do you protect that data? There are 2 ways primarily. One is do a real-time monitoring of that data. What that means is anybody who is trying to tamper that data, update anything, you need to be informed about it. Either one of the ways to send this data to your security operations center, or send alerts, multiple ways to basically keep you informed about what's happening with your data. So real-time monitoring is important. And as you monitor your data, depending on the level of risk, right, you then block that action or quarantine that user, right, depending on what that level of risk is going to be, right? So that is the protection. So we get into the prevention mode now, right? We have done the monitoring part of it. Once you have understood the crown jewels that you have, and who is trying to access those crown jewels, and if you find that as a risky transaction, then you would definitely want to get into the preventive mode by either blocking or quarantining it, right, depending on your information security guidelines. But the second category, which is so important in protection, is encryption. Okay, it is very, very important to encrypt your data at rest and in motion. I think one of the tables spoke about ransomware attack, right? Now, what happens in ransomware attack? They take your data and then ask for ransom, right? Now, imagine if that data is encrypted and the key is safe with you. It doesn't matter, they are not going to do anything with that data because their data is binary, right? It is absolutely of no use to them. As long as your key is safe with you, that data is absolutely of no use to them. So data encryption is very, very important, not only in case of, not only protecting at rest, but also in motion. Now, here is where I have seen some of the myths that organizations have that, they will say that, I have a DLP solution. Okay, so I'm good. I don't need any other, control to manage it. DLP typically will take care of the data in motion, right? Anything that is going sensitive out of your network, DLP will monitor that. And DLP is like an endpoint solution, which will typically reside on your user's endpoint, right? But what about the servers, right? Where your actual critical data is stored. DLP does not take care of that, right? DLP does not go inside the database and give you that visibility. So having DLP is must, but you need to complement that with a database activity monitoring solution as well, okay? To give you what is happening inside the databases, what your DBA users are doing inside the databases is very, very important. So these are some of the myths. I have seen some of the organizations also talking about, I have a privileged user management solution or a PIM solution or PAM solution. But again, to clear that myth, PIM solution will give you a very reactive visibility that, okay, this privileged user came, he did this activity. But once the DBA user logs into that database, the job is done, right? I mean, after that, what happens, it is not real time, right? So you need a database activity monitoring solution to really get a real-time visibility on what's happening with your data, right? Then the third step is analyze. We spoke about one of the challenge, which is reactive risk, right? Reactive posture. Now, most of the times when the data is gone out, we then do a forensics. What this stage is giving you is a proactive visibility in terms of what is the risk with your data, be it structured or unstructured. I just want to know what is the risk with my data, right? The risk could be potentially that I want to proactively find what are the outliers or what are the anomalies that are happening in my organization. For example, there could be a user who is suddenly trying to exfiltrate a lot of data, right? Or maybe somebody is trying to access that data some odd hours, right? There could be potentially many risks that you could have in an organization which you want to proactively see and stop that threat from happening rather than doing a forensics at a later stage. So analyze stage becomes very, very important to give you that proactive visibility. And we'll see in the later slides how we can achieve this proactive visibility. And then what do you do with this visibility? What do you do with this visibility of risk? You have to respond to that, right? And that is where what we have seen, one of the best practices that organizations are doing is sending this risk to your security operations center, because your security operations center SIM tool, SIEM, is basically gathering information from different log sources and correlating that for you, right? So you don't have to, so you have invested in a EDR, you have invested in different siloed solution, but you need a SIM solution to correlate that and give you that complete single incident and find out what's really happening, right? So this information, sending it to your security operations center is one of the critical use case that we see today, right? Because the way we look at it, you have a crown jewel and you have multiple layers of security around it, right? You have a firewall, you have IPS, IDS, but they do not talk to each other. So it is important that whatever you gather from a data perspective, it is being sent to your security operations center. So respond is that phase which is important. And last but not the least, I think compliance. I think we all spoke a lot about it, right? About DPDP Act, about health industry, which has HIPAA as one of the acts, right? So regulation is definitely very, very important. And I totally agree with you that there are few areas where there is no clarity from a DPDP standpoint perspective. I think you mentioned that how do we start? We even don't know whether we will be, whether we need to be compliant to DPDP or not, and all of that, right? But what we can do from IBM standpoint is that we can offer you that consulting in terms of how do you start, from where do you start, right? All of that assessment we can do for you and give you that visibility around from where do you start on the DPDP Act. And I will come to that in a moment. So these are the 5 pillars that we see as a framework. And as I said, governance is really important. But the key takeaway that we want you to have once we complete this session is that this is the framework. There is nothing beyond this. This is the framework, and we have been consulting our clients, our partners, that this is the framework that you need to use. Now, each of these phases, it's not that, as I mentioned, there will be only IBM solution. There can be a mix of multiple technologies. As I said, example of DLP, PAM solution, and all of that. So remember that this is very, very important. Now, the first phase that we're going to talk about is the discovery phase, which my colleague Vijay is going to deep dive into. And we will take you through each of these phases with a summary, a broad level architecture, and then a demo. Okay, for each of these phases. And then you can relate the challenges that you spoke about, how it really gets addressed in the solution. Okay, so with that, over to you, Vijay.
Am I audible? Audible? All right, great. Thank you. Thanks everyone for having that session wherein within yourself you had discussed about many things. I know the topics were spread across, so obviously somebody may have thought of I should contribute more from compliance or attacks or how I want to respond. But to begin with, table number 1 and 2 have contributed, and I believe many of you had discussed this point as well, wherein somebody talked about the CMDB or asset management where you do not have a complete visibility of that. So in view of that, what we are going to address is the first important key pillar of those 5, okay, which is from discovery perspective. So IBM Security Discover and Classify, ISDC, handles this in 5 phases, okay. Number 1, it keeps looking for all your network traffic, whether it can be on premise, whether it can be on cloud. It can be hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. Okay, what it looks for is what are the different things which are moving within those network traffics. Now, how does that help? It helps to identify what are the different mesh technologies within which the data has been exchanged. Somebody talked about, we have shared this only with 5 databases or replicated only to 5. There can be 6th or 7th one which also can be requesting or having a copy and maintaining it. Okay. So that's where the first things comes in, to have a clear visibility from network standpoint where all your data has been moving. So it helps to identify those sensitive data. Okay, and when we talk about those, once we identify where all these things are moving within these endpoints, or when I say endpoint, I have to be very categoric, from data sources. Now they can be on premise or on cloud, and structured and unstructured. Okay, so it looks for all these and helps to identify those specific repositories. The third one is, once the identification of those repositories is done, do a deep scanning between those repositories. Remember, since this is an on-premise solution, and even if it is for your cloud, it is going to host within only your domain or account that you have. So it is not going out and sharing anything. Having said this, what it does is scan those repositories to identify what are the contents within those databases. Data. It can be structured or unstructured. Somebody talked about PII, right? This is a critical aspect that we need to identify. So the survey says that out of 100 terabyte or any data that you have, truly there is only 15% of the data which actually needs your attention and should be protected. Rest of the data is either redundant or it is obsolete. Madam from table 1 talked about, if during the collection stage or during the, if you can define well-defined retention policies. So there comes the obsolete data or the data which is absolutely not required, or it can be duplicate in nature as well. Okay, and going through that, it will help you identify what is the specific personally identifiable information that you have within those data. And the last one, it produces a product data lineage. Now what does that mean? Having scanned through all these repositories, it will give you a clear visibility of where your data is residing, but you can define your own priorities. Somebody talked about classification as well, right? If you can better classify that, you can easily do an identification where all that, not only the data, but what type of category or the classification of that particular data is residing. Imagine you have Aadhaar card stored in some DB2 or MySQL or MS SQL, but it can also be there within your S3 bucket or somewhere which is lying. And if it gets unnoticed, that is a PII data which is at risk. You can have a product, you can have a focused approach from creating those master catalog, wherein you can define what should be termed as my customer data or my employees data, my contractors data, or maybe from citizen data, whatever that can be. So if you do that, it will help you create that data lineage. Okay, moving on. At high level, this is how the structure looks like, whether it is on data center, wherein an analytics appliance will be placed to view all the network traffic which has been, which needs to be monitored. In case of cloud, there will be a again containerized one which will be looking into this data. I have a demo for this as well. Just hold on. Okay.
This up, just quickly, when you discover the data, right, there are multiple ways to discover the data. One is using the regular expressions, like Aadhaar card has a format, right? Credit card is 16 digit, right? We have out of the box regular expressions to go and search and bring that data for you, right? This also addresses the challenge of bringing the unstructured data, right? That also is something which the tool will be able to do. So the point is, we are not just limited to regular expressions, we go at the network level also, at the unstructured data level also, to scan and give you that complete visibility.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tushar. Okay. Okay. So the tool is ISDC, where it has scanned multiple repositories. Those repositories can be, okay. So those repositories can be databases, or it can be your unstructured data from S3 bucket or SIMB. So for an example, here the business context has been defined, wherein to identify only EMEA subsidiary, and there are multiple ways in which the data has been stored at multiple repositories. So one of them is, so what it has scanned is, it has tried and found out that there are unique objects which are like only 100,000, but there are multiple copies also which are residing within multiple sources. It also looks for if there is anything it has found from a in motion. Okay. The good part here is it has also identified every data that gets scanned, it will get a unique identification. So it is likely that the uniqueness of that, there can be multiple ways in which the username can be stored. Like Vijay Lele, it can be Vijay Vasant Lele, or there can be something else associated with user, but having what is the uniqueness or based on which it can be very sure that this is the same user for which there is another information which is also residing in that. Okay. Okay. I'll show you an example, one of the examples which is from credit card CVV, which has been found, and what it looks for is this particular user, and it has identified that this information is actually available. It has derived from two databases as well. It is also there from different RDAs as well, like MySQL as well. It is there in the files. This is a specific file, an unstructured one, which was scanned, and yeah, we can also look at that. Okay. Now, if there is some information which is classified or which need not be shown or shared to this admin, obviously we can have this blocked, and that's why we see this is the sensitive information which should not be made visible for the end user. So here we can actually create a business context, and that actually falls from a perspective of having EMEA subsidiary, and let me show you how it actually looks like. Okay. So the business context talks about show information only about France PII data, and it is categorized from an EMEA subsidiary. So it has looked this information. For an example, let me do it for credit card number. So if I simply click on this, it will show me this particular information of credit card has been derived, or it is actually stored in a particular database of MySQL as well in DB2. It is also there as part of an SMB which actually has this information. It also shows a CSV file in which it has stored. So basically what it has done is scan all the repositories given and created a repository of itself wherein you can easily go ahead and find this. To summarize, the single application can give you all this information. It can be from structured or unstructured data, give you this insight as to what is the security posture from a compliance perspective. I'll take a pause here and
yeah, so if you look at the DPDP Act, one of the asks is if the data principal calls up, he has a right to erase, right? So the administrator of the tool actually can go and search that user and see what are the access he has, where that information is stored, and also erase that, right? So this tool, with that visibility, you will be able to also comply to the DPDP Act from a data principal as well as a data fiduciary perspective. There are certain reports that you have to produce in terms of the data subject or data principal, what all access they have, where it is stored. So this will also help you to give that report out of the box. Okay.
Right. So just extending what Tushar had mentioned, this is called DSAR, which is mandatory, which will be there, which is called data subject access request. That report will be required or asked by the end user to ask enterprises about what all data has been stored of that particular user, and there is an obligation from fiduciary to give that report in timely fashion. So this tool will give that report immediately. Okay, so that's where all this information will be available, and it is ready to be shown with 8 key parameters as to what is the third-party processor which is there, what is the retention period of that data processor contracts if it has been captured. So there are 8 categories based on which this report will be generated.
Yeah, I think yeah, good. Can you just show that, put that demo, the data protection demo? I'll just quickly go through that.
Hey.
Okay, so what we have done is we have completed the discovery phase, okay? And what we'll get into is the next phase. Now you know where your sensitive your question? We have 20 minutes. You can ask questions after the session. So now you know where your sensitive data resides. Now the next phase is protecting it, right? So this is the interface of the tool that we have, which is known as IBM Security Guardian. Now, when you talk about protection, one of the important aspects that I mentioned is the policies. So the tool comes with out-of-the-box policies for the regulations like DPDP, GDPR, and the basic policies that you can start using it. Remember, I was talking about the data governance part. So this is the starting point that you can have. And then the analyze phase, where I was talking about the proactive visibility, which again maps to the challenge that we spoke about, which is the reactive posture, right? So let me show you what kind of proactive visibility that I am referring to. Now, the tool has got advanced analytics capability, which is powered by AI and ML. What that helps you to give is visibility is the different threats that are associated, right? And categorizes it based on those different, industry-known threat vectors. Like, for example, SQL injection, or for that matter, denial of service, so on and so forth, right? So today, as a CISO or a CIO, I want to see what are the account takeovers in my organization, what are the SQL injection in my organization. I can just go and then just select that category and find out. I don't have to wait for an incident to happen and then do a forensics on it, right? So this is something which is available. Now I can basically investigate. Let's say in this case, a user Don is categorized under denial of service because he was trying to do activities which were suddenly a lot of activities he was trying to do on that databases. Hence, it has been categorized under denial of service. And then I can further drill down on this to find out what's really happening with this. It gives me a good view of what were the off hours, what were the weekend hours. It gives me a distribution of. Now, this is one example. The second could be there could be some malicious stored procedures where somebody has injected a malware into the stored procedure. So you can actually go and then find out what was the original SQL, what was modified, and all of that, right? So it gives a good proactive visibility into the risk. Now, this is a real-time visibility that you get. Now, if you want to really find out who are those top 50 risky DBA users in your organization, then this gives you that visibility. So for example, let's say I want to find out, I can just hover over this user, which is Polly, and find out that this the risk score of this user is really very high. And why it is high is because it has contributed to multiple indicators. For example, maybe that user has violated a policy, or maybe that user was trying to run lot of administrative objects, or maybe the user was trying to access these out of office hours, right? All of that has contributed to the risk being very high. And what I can do from this same console is that I can take an action. I can send this risky information to the existing SOAR platform or a ticketing system. Like in this case, we have shown ServiceNow, right? ServiceNow as one of the ticketing tools, because generally what we have seen organizations following a process of having a ticket, and then through the ticket you basically go and take an action. So this is all automated, right, through that. Now, this is the other aspect. The third is, if you want to really investigate more from a graphical perspective and really not look into the logs, this also gives you a good graphical view of what was the source application that the user was trying to access, who was that user, what were the commands that they were trying to access. Now, if I see this, there is one user, which is Polly, which is having direct access to MySQL. I can drill down further into this. I can see that Polly was trying to create tables, and then I can see what are the activities, so on and so forth, right? So investigation dashboard is also provided so that you really don't have to go deep into the logs and figure out the correlation. It gives you a good graphical view of this. So that's the third phase that we were referring to, the analyze phase, where this kind of visibility helps you to stop the threats from happening, right? And it also gives you some wonderful visibility around what are the suspicious activities happening in an organization. Remember the protection part that I was talking about, the anomalies that are associated in the organization, you can actually see through these dashboards, right? You can see what are the policy violations that have happened, so on and so forth. So this is the protect and analyze phase. Now, the respond phase, what we have seen is that as I mentioned, the best practice is to send to your security operations center. Now, I'm sure most of you would have a SOC and you would have a SIM, but if you happen to use IBM QRadar as one of the SIMs, then what we have also done is we have built a special integration with QRadar, which is a bidirectional integration, which means that whatever information you gather as a violation, you send it to QRadar, or that for that matter any SIM, but it is reverse also which is possible. For example, let's say QRadar finds that Guardium is giving all the information which is all good. It does not seem to be a challenge. But what there could be a potential issue is that there is a privilege escalation attack which has happened on the same server, or there is a ransomware attack which has happened on the same server, and Guardium is just looking inside the database. It is not looking that the server itself is compromised. Now QRadar will see that and tell Guardium that, hey, while you tell me that all activities looks good, but the server on which these activities are performed is compromised. So you need to elevate, or you need to quarantine or block this user because the server itself is compromised. So this two-way integration is something which you have built with QRadar, while we can integrate with any other SIM, but this two-way special integration we have built with QRadar. Now that's the respond part of it, right? And the last part, which is the compliance part, I think Vijay has already shared the report, the report of whenever a data principal calls, the organization is responsible for either, erasing that data or telling him how are we storing that data, how are we securing that data, and all of that, right? So that compliance part also gets covered. Now, going back to the presentation, can you just go to the... So pretty much if you see, right, this is the entire Guardium portfolio. This is one platform which will help you to address the data protection and the data privacy requirements. Now, what we spoke about, what I just demoed, was the Guardium data protection part of it, right? Now, what we also have is the data encryption as well. Now, unfortunately, we have very less time, but I'll try to cover up as much as possible very quickly. Let me just go through this. I think we spoke about this. Now, one of the USPs, we have seen a good adoption of Guardium for a lot of BFSI customers, okay? And one of the reasons why organizations are adopting Guardium is the ability to integrate with the heterogeneous databases, because you will not have all Oracle or you will not have all MS SQL. You will have a mixture of open source, you will have big data, you will have data warehouse, you will have cloud data sources, all of that, SAP HANA, so on and so forth, right? The ability of Guardium to integrate with all those heterogeneous is one of the USPs that we have, apart from the use cases that I just spoke about, right? Like discovery, monitoring, and all of that, right? And it uses the analytics capabilities that I just spoke about, which is powered by AI and ML, right? I'll really not go into the architecture right now. We can deep dive into it depending on your level of interest, how this really works. Coming to the encryption part of it, which I said is a must to have control. Encryption is a must to have control. Now, when we talk about encryption, right? Typically, when I talk to the C-level execs, I think what they mention is I have encryption in place. So what they mean is that I have a native encryption in place. My database has native encryption. But is that good enough? Maybe not, because Oracle, let's say, have their own encryption, which is called transparent data encryption. Even Microsoft has it. But the biggest challenge is the database is hosted on an operating system. Now imagine if there is a ransomware attack which happens, or a privilege escalation attack happens. Somebody can just copy all the files from that server and recreate a database. What that means is your database is compromised despite you having native encryption, because ransomware attack will just steal that information. Now, it is important to encrypt the data at rest, which means native encryption is important, but the configuration files, the data what you store on the server is also equally important, right? And that is where file and folder level encryption becomes very, very important. And even if the attacks that we spoke about, like ransomware, happens, it is absolutely going to be of no use as long as the encryption key is safe with you. Now, in this, what we also do is you can basically harden the environment such that only authorized users or authorized processes can access. Ransomware typically is a third-party process, right? It should not have access to your data. So if I harden the environment saying that only authorized users, only authorized process or authorized applications will have access to the data, no matter what the attack happens, they will not have access to the data. So that's the other control you can do using file and database encryption. Application level encryption is more of at the application level if you want to really encrypt the data. Whenever you are capturing the information as part of data collection, you want to make sure that when you collect the information and when you store it, it has to be encrypted. So application encryption will help you do that. Now, we all know RBI guideline of tokenization, right? You have to tokenize your data. You cannot store the actual value of the data, right? You cannot store the actual value, as simple as that. You have to store some token value. Now, what we are seeing is that with tokenization, the benefit is that even if somebody logs into the database and sees, let's say, the credit card information, it's of absolutely no use because that number is just a token. It's just a random value. The real value will be stored in a separate hardened tokenized server. Whenever the application needs that information, it will make a secure API call and then it will basically get that information, right? So the biggest difference between encryption and tokenization is encryption, cannot be reversed. This can be reversed because you tokenize it, then you de-tokenize it, right? But that tokenization is something which we are also seeing a lot of attention because of the regulations that have come up. And last but not the least, the key management is very, very important. Now, it's like, if I have all sort of controls in my house, but if I lose the key, it's gone, right? I think a lot of you mentioned about the awareness, a lot of you mentioned about social engineering attacks, right, which happen. So I think having key is very important. So what we are seeing, one of the important aspect is, while organizations still continue to have native encryption, the native database encryption, which has its own key, what the guideline says is you need to have a mechanism to centrally manage the keys. So you need to rotate the keys over a period of time, centrally manage those keys, okay? And not have like, I have the key and I'm keeping the key within the same place. We know the chances of failure are high. So key management becomes important. One of the use cases that we are seeing as part of key management is for the organizations who are on multiple clouds, like AWS, IBM, Google Cloud, multiple clouds, and each cloud have their own way of managing the keys, right? And that is the biggest challenge for the organization, that how do they centrally manage the keys for all the cloud providers that they have? Because the biggest risk that they see is if that cloud provider is compromised, so is their data. So they want to control the keys themselves, right? While the data is still in cloud, they want to have the control. So centrally managing the keys for the different cloud providers that you have is also one important use case that we will be able to address. Especially with the digital transformation happening, organizations moving to multi-cloud, this really becomes very, very important. I'll not really go into the architecture because of the time, but I really want to take few questions. Yeah, I think pretty much we are done. And coming back to this framework, right? So we have covered each of these phases, which we firmly believe are important. As an organization, you need to have visibility. You need to protect your data based on that visibility. You need to analyze that data and proactively take that action. And then finally, make sure that that data is not working in silos. It is basically integrated. You need to marry this with the SIM solution so that you get the complete 360 visibility and finally comply, right? So from a compliance standpoint, we already showed you that how it can become a starting point for you, how the tool can become a starting point for you to get that visibility. And I think few of you mentioned where to start, right? So this actually gives you a template, okay, so that you don't have to start from the scratch, right? And you can always modify that template, right, depending on your information security guidelines. But this gives you a starting point in terms of how do you comply to the different regulations. So the tool has some out-of-the-box templates for PCI DSS, SOX, HIPAA, now GDPR and DPDP Act as well, right? So with that, I think we are done. And I think we have another 5 minutes. We can take questions. Yeah. Yeah, please.
You mentioned that using encryption, the first stage of file and database,
correct,
we can protect against ransomware attacks.
Correct.
See, as I understand, any attack on data has one of the two motives, theft or denial, right? I understand the ransomware attacks are more for denial than theft. So even if you encrypt, you put one envelope over the data, the ransomware attacker can put another envelope and say that, okay, your data is denied to you. You pay me this money and I give you the key. Do you have any solution to that? See, he is not interested in my data. He's just denying access to my own data by putting another encryption.
Right. So the way I look at it is that, one is that, you cannot have 100% security, right? You cannot have 100% security. But one of the methods that we see is, apart from file and folder encryption, is that you need to also regularly back up your data, right? You need to regularly back up your data so that what happens is, even if the hacker takes your data and says, I'm not going to give back your data, it's fine because I have a backup of that data. The challenge comes when he says that I'm going to publish this data in publicly. That is where the challenge comes. And that is where you need to proactively have controls like two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication to your data. So even if, let's say, somebody is trying to access, the two-factor authentication is one layer of security that he has to break into. And with file and folder, what happens is we are already hardening that environment such that ransomware, even if they come somehow.
No, I think your answer is there.
Yeah.
Two-factor authentication is a general precaution everyone will take.
Correct.
When you say your live data is encrypted, and what his query was, if the hacker takes that data and encrypt it with something, so that he's denying the data to you.
Doesn't matter.
The solution is the backup. If you have a right backup mechanism, yes, you need to take that services out of the network, bring up your network.
Correct. And it is encrypted anyways, he cannot read it.
Yes.
So even if he creates another layer, it really doesn't matter.
So another challenge,
the key is safe with you.
No, another challenge, if he want to misuse it and publish, yes, he can't do that.
He can't do that. That's the answer, right? So it is very, very, very important to encrypt the data at rest and in motion. Yeah, please.
So the question that I had was that while we are doing the discovery, right, I have so many applications, databases, data lake, etc., in different networks within the organization. And then this tool is going to reach out, penetrate into all of these databases, application and everything. So while doing discovery, like in one of the demo you showed that, okay, there is this card number, CV number, etc. Is it going to again create a replica of all of that databases? Because now when you're showing CVV number over here, is it going to make an API call back to that source database, or will it store locally?
Locally. So there is a root data asset we have a root data asset, which eventually becomes a single source of truth, where we will store that data.
So you're storing the actual data or the metadata?
The metadata.
That's what I wanted to
The
understand.
metadata. Okay, but this actually gives you, because you have to scan your repositories, right? And as I said, there are multiple ways to do that. One is using regular expression, the other way that Vijay showed, right? But we do not every time do it. We have that metadata with us, and then we can pull out the report based on that metadata.
Okay.
Any other questions? We actually have just 50 seconds. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, one of the questions is discovery is definitely an important thing, and a lot of people, I think, table one spoke about multiple sources in which the data is being maintained and all that, right? So, as part of this, after the data discovery, and you said, okay, we discover and then try to monitor, protect, all that.
Right.
Definitely makes sense. But one of the things from an implementation perspective, should we also not consider and see whether we can minimize the footprint of data that is flying all over the place, so that you talk about a single source of truth and also try to minimize unwanted things, because as part of privacy, you may also have to kind of do a process re-engineering if required. Otherwise, it may end up like a typical ERP implementation, where you end up computerizing your manual processes and say your ERP is not giving business benefits.
Right.
So, one of the hidden benefits that we should see here is also to see how we can minimize the footprint so that we don't have to monitor more and we don't have to protect more.
Right.
All these things are going to be costing us more, and eventually if we try to do this, we can end up saving some unwanted effort also.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we are seeing is, as more and more applications are coming up, right, they have their own individual databases in which they're storing that information. But as I mentioned, data governance really becomes very important aspect in this, right? Because as you rightly mentioned, right, you need to know what you want to protect, right? Only then I can go and discover, right? I need to have the right policies in place, right? If I don't have that, then what I'm going to do? Because it's a cycle. Because that policy which I am creating, okay, eventually has to be relooked at over a period of time. Because I think one of the table mentioned that the attack vectors are, increasing, right? So that policy also has to be revisited, right? All the assets that I initially thought, which I did the categorization that. This is confidential or this is not confidential, this has to be publicly available. Now that I have to relook at it. So I think to your point, I would say that data governance will really play a very important role in minimizing all of that. The more data governance you have accurate, the more minimal you will have the data being at all the places. Because as I mentioned, data is everywhere, but security is not. So we need to minimize that, using data governance as one of the approach. Yeah, please.
This solution is having access in terms of discovery, analyzing, and whatever the full life cycle that you.
Correct.
So it seems it is having access to most of the critical systems, networks. In a way, is it temporary or is it permanent? Is my first question. Based on that, I can understand.
So this information, what we are talking about is the, as I mentioned, right? It's a metadata that we are storing.
No, it's not. What I'm talking about is the metadata that it is getting from my crown jewels or my basically it has access to everything. Now that access is what I am trying to say. Whether we are creating a new crown jewel and it could, the security of itself is becoming difficult. I mean.
Okay, so today, if you look at the current state, what is the current state today that you have, right? You have different applications, different databases. You're managing the security of those in silos, right? What we are trying to do is centrally manage that so that operationally it becomes very efficient. Now you can centrally define whatever policies you want to define across. You can enforce uniformity in the policies across your heterogeneous databases. Otherwise, the challenge that we see today is every application or every database have their own policy and nothing is uniform. With this, what we are trying to achieve is the centralization part of it.
No, that's fine. I don't want to go into that centralization or decentralization, the aspects from the security angle, because at one point in time, we always go to decentralized mode, and sometimes then we come back to centralized. I don't want to go into that discussion.
Sure.
But the point is, the security aspects of this particularly, because that means this is like super admin in a way.
Okay.
You have so many admins.
Okay, so
I think you are getting my point.
I got your point. So what we are doing is that this solution is basically coming as a appliance, which is like a completely hardened appliance. Even the root access is not provided to that user or that administrator of this tool. He has to basically, there is a process that he has to go through to get the root access, and he does not get the password. That is one. The second is, it is completely tamper-proof, okay? The data, what we store is completely encrypted, and nobody can just go and access that data inside the databases. There will be different roles, responsibilities that will be created. The person can log in and only do that. He cannot be having access to entirely all the data. And we can basically get into behind the scenes how we do that. We can definitely have a session with you, but I can assure you from a security standpoint, yes, we take care of that. And a lot of banks, for more than, I would say, 500 plus databases are using this solution in India right now, right? And it's pretty much secure. We follow all the secure practices in terms of making sure, because we are centralizing this, we do make sure that all the security practices are being followed, right? I think once we get into the architecture part of it, I think you will have clarity. I actually have had those slides, but I had to skip it because of the time. But we can definitely get into that in detail later. So with that, thank you so much.
Tushar, last question. Will this Guardian be called the GRC tool for India?
No. We are not replacing GRC. We are not replacing. GRC is meant for something else.
This like Archer and all that, we have lot many GRC tools, but so far we do not have any governing rule or act or policy in India. So what will be the GRC tool for specific to Indian requirement?
So what we have seen Guardian tool helping you to integrate with SAP kind of a tool, right? Because SAP also stores the data. So anything and everything, any application that is storing the data, it is more concerned about that, right? Like there could be Archer GRC. It will also have its own database. There will be SAP HANA. It will have its own database. But how do you get visibility into all these heterogeneous database activities is what Guardian will be more concerned about. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are here. You can connect with us one-to-one, and do let us know if you need any detailed session on this. We are happy to do it. Okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tushar,
Thanks.
Kapil, and Vijay. For insightful discussion. I think it requires a full day workshop probably to delve into the architecture of this. This is very interesting stuff, especially what is happening around the data protection regime. Signing off now, let's have a tea break and then we can have a next session at around 4 p.m. Thank you so much.